Put out your notes for me. Hope everybody had a great weekend. How we feeling? Everybody good? Everybody good? We did something fun and exciting this weekend that you didn't invite me to be a part of. What'd you do, Tim?
We went to a movie, but the movie was a little too much for Eli, so we had to go. But I did get to drive to the driveway from the gate of the complex so that was exciting.
You behind the wheel of a car. Does that scare anybody else?
Yeah, Tim behind in a vehicle scares me.
I mean, I love you. Don't get me wrong. That scares me a little bit. Think about it. Yes, ma'am. You got a what? A hotel party. I didn't get invited? Was y'all doing some trash? Is that why you didn't want me there? I can't invite my Bible teacher. We finna get turned up. We finna get lit. We finna get crunk. I can't invite the Bible teacher. I see how it is. I see how it is. Good. Okay. So who went to church yesterday? Wow. Wow.
My parents went. I was sick.
You're a liar.
Upper respiratory.
You didn't have an upper respiratory. You have a sin problem.
Oh my God! Fatality.
Got some unrepentant sin in our lives. All right. Why is worship important? Ray Sean, 1 minute. Why is worship important? Stop. What is worship? Define it first. Ray Sean, he's got this.
Praising God, something like that.
Praising God? Riley? What's worship God mean? I'm sorry? Connecting. Okay. Annalene? Worship?
Just like doing what gifts he's given you to glorify him.
Okay. Using the gifts he's given you to glorify him. Khalil?
It's like showing how much you love God.
Okay. Showing how much you love him. All right. So let's, if we understand and define it as those things, I think all of those are accurate. Why is it important? Ray Sean, I come back to you. Why is it important?
I think it's important because it shows how important to God, how I'm not a pity for that.
I think you're putting it well. It shows that he's important to you. That's fair. What else would you add to that, Robbie?
God's like critical universe with man's praise.
Okay.
It says that God will cry out, but we don't.
Okay. All right. Dylan, what else? Why is worship important to you, Dylan?
Like to me, or just
To you.
so that you like caring.
Okay. I would agree. Listen, there is nothing difficult about worship. Nothing. Can we agree on that? Who disagrees with that? Because I want to try to make a case for why I think I'm right. There is nothing difficult about worship. Christian or non-Christian, pagan or holy, every human being was designed to worship and does worship something. Think about it. How many of you worship your favorite sports team? Right? What about your favorite music group? Band. Think about it when you go to a concert. How many of you ever been to a concert? Right? Yeah, Fortnite. How many of you worship at the altar of Fortnite? We can worship art. We can worship music, food. Food. Like Evan and his honey bunches of oats, or which one is it? Honey bunches of oats. 9 bowls. Living strong. Right? Listen, what else do we worship? Do we worship comfort? Do we worship power? Do we worship control? Money? Achievement? Worship is easy. Worship is easy. We all worship women. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's the thing, at some point, all of these objects are going to fail you, though. She's going to fail you one day. Ladies, he's going to fail you
This will be
one day. No. That's not why. God calls us to worship Him. He commands it, He desires it, He pursues it, He deserves it, and He will reward it. God bestows His provision, His grace, sovereignty, power in those who worship Him in spirit and in truth, right? Through worship, what did we say worship was last week? We said the church grows what? Stronger. Stronger. Now let me pause for a second. Here's the expectation. We're going to have a test next week on just these 5 things. Okay? On just these 5 things. I'm encouraging you strongly to take really good notes on all this material. And if it even remotely sounds like it might be important, I'd write it down if I were you.
So right now.
And once we're done with the test, here's what we're then going to do. We're going to take the last couple of days of class next week when we're done. Because we'll finish with this stuff on Tuesday when we come back from the break. Okay? And then Wednesday, most likely, next Wednesday, we will test on this material. And then next Thursday and Friday, we will spend both days in class working on your projects and working through outlines. And in fact, what I'm going to do is reverse engineer mine. I'm going to, on the board, do my outline for this series that we are going through that we're beginning today. And I'm going to kind of do it for you to show as an example of what I'm looking for. Because your outline is a test grade. Your project is a test grade. These are a big deal. Okay? I don't do traditional midterms and finals and all that good stuff. These kind of things are your big time grade for this semester. Okay? This is your big time grade. Okay? So I want to make sure and give you some time in class where we can do it together. I want to visually allow you to see it so that you don't give me some bootleg outline and think that that's going to be okay. All right? So we're going to reverse this and do it together. Okay? All right. So that's why, I just tried to explain to you why I think worship is important. What happens when we worship? Erickson, what happens when we worship? Give it everything you got, okay? What else? Aaron?
It shows others how much God is blessed you.
Okay. It's a way to show others how much the Lord has blessed you. Khalil?
Breakthrough.
I'm sorry?
I said breakthrough.
Breakthroughs. Breakthroughs can happen. Man, you ever had that moment in church during worship where you just, like the water breaks?
Yes.
The tears begin to flow, and you just feel the Holy Spirit. You feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. Right? Absolutely. There's this experience recorded. This is from Isaiah 6, verses 1 through 4. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphims, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Can you imagine having worship to the point, like if we began to worship in here, can you imagine if the walls began to shake? And not in a scary, oh my God, we're dying kind of way, but in a shaking because there's just such a movement happening in the room. Right? Can you imagine what that picture of worship would be for us? Here's a couple things that I want you to write down. I got 3 things for you that I think what happens when we worship. First, worship brings an upward look. It's a chance for us to kind of look up, literally. We get to glance at God on His throne in all of His glory, just like what's described here in Isaiah 6. I think worship refocuses our view of God. It pulls our affections off our idols and it puts them onto God. It causes us to remember how good He is, how big He is, how kind He is, how powerful He is, how loving He is, how holy He is. So I think real worship first brings an upward look. Our eyes look to the cross. God has used my children to take my eyes off of the things that were idols on this earth. I can remember one year right after Christian had been born. So this has been, he's 5, so this was probably 4+ years ago. For you Georgia fans in this room, you may remember it. It was Georgia and Clemson opened the football season against each other. And it was in Athens. And Georgia beat Clemson. And I remember and Clemson was favored, but Georgia pulled the upset and beat them. And I remember being really upset. And I also remember Christian, it was almost like God used him in that moment. I remember Christian wakes up and begins to scream and to cry. And here I am, I'm pissed because we've just lost a football. Right? He's crying, Monique is not home, so I walk into his bedroom and get him out of his crib and begin to hold him. And the moment I pick him up, and the moment I laid him across my chest, there's something about a baby, an infant, when they hear the heartbeat of mom or dad, that it just soothes them. That's why you always see new babies, newborns being held against the chest like that, because it reminds them of the womb. Think about it. When you're in your mother's womb, you're hearing your mom's heartbeat. I lay him against my chest, and he calms down completely, and he just is staring at me. And in that moment, I remember it 5 years ago, but I remember it. It was like, why am I upset about a stupid football game when I have this gift that God has given me? And so God used Christian in that moment to kind of remind me to look upward again. Yeah, I was bummed that we lost a football game. But what greater treasure did I have that I was holding in my hands in that moment? Does that make sense? And sometimes God will use circumstances to help us refocus where our energies need to be. And that's what worship does. It brings us an upward look. The second thing worship does is brings us an inward look. In verse 5 of that same text in Isaiah 6, it said, "Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among the people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King." It brings an inward look. Listen, when you see God for who He really is, you start to see yourself for who you really are. And if we're honest with ourselves, that's not always a really pretty picture. We don't often like to take an inward evaluation of ourselves because we know our inward selves to be rotten, don't we? So who wants to look at ourselves with a critical eye when we know how messed up we are? Does that make sense? You start to see things in your heart and your life that didn't really bother you before. That ever happened? Like you have this incredible worship experience and then you start evaluating and you're like, holy cow, I've never noticed how stinking selfish I am before. I've never noticed how hateful I speak to my friends before. You begin to be mindful. God will open your eyes through worship. He will open your eyes to seeing things in yourself that you've never really admitted before. And you begin to see, man, I really do struggle with my mouth. Why do I do that? Why do I curse? Why do I talk the way I talk? Why do I lie? Why am I hateful? Worship will bring an inward look. And notice that after Isaiah saw and he confessed his sinfulness, he also experienced the mercy and the grace and the forgiveness that comes through worship. Right? I think that's what really happens when we worship. But it also doesn't end there. In verse 8 of that same text, he says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?'" And I love this, because I've said this to God many times, and I pray that you will as well. In verse 8, he looks at him and says, "Here I am. Send me." Here I am. Send me. There's an inward look that's always followed by an outward look. The last one, an outward look. Worship leads to an outward look. A personal response or an action. When I say an outward look, a personal response or an action. A desire to be obedient to whatever God calls you to do. See, genuine worship just isn't about singing songs. It's not getting a good feeling in your heart. It's about seeing God for who He really is. His power, His greatness, His holiness, His sovereignty, His love, His compassion. And then it's giving Him what He's worth. Right? And what He's worth is our best. The best of our time, the best of our talents, the best of our treasures, the best of our thoughts, the best of our actions. God deserves our very best. Everybody look at Hebrews 10, 24, 25 in the Bible. Hebrews 10. It's in the New Testament. I think it's about page 731 in your FCA Bible. If that's the one you happen to have. Yeah, bottom of page 731. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Everybody got it? Stand with me when you got it. Stand up when you get it. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of His return is drawing near. Did y'all catch that? Let us not neglect our meeting together. What's he talking about?
Everybody coming together.
Church. He's talking about church. And as I said to you, as we begin this series, this is church. A body of believers coming together. So our idea of church is that. It's not the four walls of the physical place where you may worship. Excel Christian Academy is not a church, but this room certainly can be. Okay? I love what else he said in verse 24. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love. Be seated. Be seated. All right, so here's my 5 A's for you. What are some benefits of corporate worship? We're going to close with this. I think there's 5 specific things, because that's what he's just described here in Hebrews chapter 10, is corporate worship. And that's what church is. It's corporate worship. We come together and we worship the Lord at the same time. That's what church is. That's called corporate worship. Several benefits of corporate worship. The first one, it awakens us. Listen, think about how this mob mentality affects us in other areas. We've talked about that before, right? One person says something or is bold about something, you've been thinking it, but you would never dare say it because you don't know what everybody else is thinking. Then all of a sudden they say it and you're like, yeah, that's right, yeah. Think about how that mob mentality happens. You go to a sporting event, everybody's really quiet. You don't want to be the first one to jump up and yell and rant and rave, but as soon as somebody else does, what will you do? Man, we'll turn into some screaming Indians if our team does something well and everybody else starts cheering. We'll do the same. Corporate worship just awakens us. It's how that mob mentality can affect us, but in a positive way in this setting. The second thing is it assures us. Because Genesis 2:18, God said it's not good for us to be alone. How many times have you heard me say, God wired you to be in relationship? You're not meant to be alone. And so corporate worship assures us that God is here and we're not going to be alone, and that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Every one of us desire in our lives to pursue something bigger than ourselves. Number 3, it advances us. Corporate worship advances us. 1 Corinthians 14:3, Paul wrote, it's for our general upbuilding, encouragement, and consolation. Paul said our general upbuilding, encouragement, and consolation. It advances our faith in corporate worship. Number 4, accepts another's leading. This is what worship does. Listen, it makes it okay for you to be a follower sometimes. Many of us are wired to lead. Many of us are wired to not want to submit to the authority of other people. But corporate worship helps us to do that. Helps us to understand the benefit and the value of just sometimes being a follower. Many of us struggle with accepting another person's leadership, especially when we're teenagers. And then the last one, I think it accentuates joy. Accentuates. A-C-C-E-N-T-U-A-T-E-S. Accentuates joy. There's a Swedish proverb that says, shared joy is double joy. And think about that. What would happen right now if Addison Tatum just broke out laughing? Huh? You get weird. Okay, great point. The first moment, Addison just starts laughing for no reason. Everybody else will go, what the heck's wrong with crazy up there? And the more she continues to laugh, guess what's going to begin to happen? Mackenzie and Emily will laugh. Because that's their friend. No, because that's their friend. The three of them are really close. They begin to laugh because they're like, she's such a goofball. And then Tierra will start laughing, and then you'll start laughing. And then like half of you right now are smiling. You're just thinking about it. That's my point. If somebody starts laughing, give it 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Multiple people will be laughing. And you don't even know what we're laughing about. My wife has this crazy thing. She loves to lay on the bed, on her back, and let her head hang off the side of the bed. So she's like laying, well, I can't even do it right now. But she lays with her head off, and then she just starts laughing. She just loves to do it. She said it makes her feel like a little kid. Whatever. It's kind of weird. But if she does it, I start laughing too, because she looks ridiculous. But it's still funny. And I dare you to be in the room with anyone who is genuinely laughing from their gut and not laugh with them. It's impossible. It's impossible. And I know that because even describing Addison laughing, half of you immediately started smiling. Joy is contagious. And God wants you and I to accentuate joy. He wants us to use the joy that we feel to minister to somebody else. Close with this. True worship is seeing afresh. Write this down. I don't know if I came up with this. This was inspired to me. I don't know if it's mine. If it might be. This might be a Boatfield original. I don't know. But write this down. True worship is seeing afresh the tremendous worth of God and, in response, giving Him the best of everything you have. True worship is seeing afresh, meaning seeing new, seeing with fresh eyes, the tremendous worth of God, and in response, giving Him the best of everything you have. That is what worship is. And if you and I, individually and corporately, began to do that, how would our church grow stronger? Amen? Huh? All right, so tomorrow we will pick up and we will start talking about ministry. All right? As you begin to put your things away, I think that I was supposed to have maybe done this Friday and I failed you. So forgive me. Who does not have this? I need to make sure everybody goes home with one. What you do with it after today. Did you get one? You got one? Grace, you got one? All right. send one more back. How many on his side? I'll need one. You need ones here? 1, 2, 3. We'll send those 2 back. You need one here? Addison, you need one? Victoria? I don't know if you want one, but I'm required to give it to you. What you do with it, what you do. Hang on. Keep it calm. Hey, Aaron, you got one? Khalil, you got one? Channing, you got one? I'll pass that back for Aaron.
Little lady loves you.
I'll take one.
Josh, you got one yet?
I have a peripheral infection in the nose. No, I'm not gonna breathe in hands in it. It works when you
Dylan, you got yours?
I've taken my iron. I've only passed out 5
Get 2 LNDs.
Stop that.